Canada is currently reviewing a fighter jet deal. It's for the F-35 jets, 88 of them, 88 jets. This deal is worth more than $13 billion, but it is currently under review.
107, contact 7 miles.
We have alternatives to the F-35, so we will explore those. And if the United States no longer wants to lead, Canada will.
Canada is reassessing its reliance on the F-35. If the United States no longer wants to take the lead, Ottawa is gearing up to step into the spotlight. The strategic partnership that's defined North American security for decades is under strain with Donald Trump's return to the presidency. In response, Canada has been toughening its trade stance, pulling away from Washington not just in economic deals, but also in military decisions. U.S. tariffs on steel and aluminum have clogged up critical Canadian export routes, and ongoing disputes in sectors like dairy and lumber are only cranking up the tension between the two. But the breaking point goes beyond trade. Defense cooperation between the two countries is sliding into uncharted territory. The spotlight's now on the F-35, one of the slickest fighter jets ever built. But Canada's rethinking its $13 billion deal with the United States. Rising costs, political uncertainty, and Trump's go-it-alone rhetoric are pushing Ottawa to scout out other strategic options. Enter the United Kingdom as a potential new buddy. London's pitched Canada on joining the Global Combat Air Program, a push to develop sixth-generation fighters. More than just a military team-up, this alliance throws a direct challenge to the U.S.'s reign as the world's top dog in defense tech. The Canada-U.S. tariff showdown. Canada drifting from Washington and cozying up to London might signal more than just a diplomatic reshuffle. Could this be a crack in the West's defense framework? Are we watching a deep strategic shift or just a knee-jerk reaction to Trump's comeback? Those are the big questions we're digging into in this video. But before we kick off, hit that subscribe button, turn on notifications, and drop a like to keep up with our latest breakdowns. Canada's Ministry of Defense originally planned to snag 88 F-35 Lightning II jets from the U.S. Now, that contract's under the microscope. Trump's hardline stance on tariffs is throwing a wrench into the project's feasibility. Ottawa officials are saying our country's strategic interests ain't going to be dictated by one-sided pressure or threats. Prime Minister Mark Carney doubled down on that in an official statement, widely seen as a loud and clear hint about the F-35's shaky future. The White House hasn't clapped back directly, but whispers out of Washington suggest sanctions might be on the table if Canada bails on the deal. Mark Carney, with his past gig as a central bank governor, is known for his technical chops and razor-sharp analysis. Despite the steep political and financial cost of ditching the F-35 project, signs point to him being ready to roll the dice. Defense Minister Bill Blair says Ottawa's weighing options beyond the $13.2 billion fifth-generation fighter buy from Lockheed Martin. His comments hint that Canada might take the first batch of F-35s, but swap out the rest for European planes, like Sweden's Gripen, which is definitely on the table. While Ottawa mulls life beyond the F-35, the UK's stepping up with a strategic offer. London signaled it's open to Canada, jumping into the sixth-generation Global Combat Air Program, GCAP for short. It's a three-way pact between the UK, Japan, and Italy, aimed at building the next wave of combat aircraft. The idea of Canada joining came up in a written parliamentary question from Liberal Democrat MP David Chadwick on March 25, 2025. He asked if the British Ministry of Defence was seriously thinking about inviting Canada on board. Minister Maria Eagle's reply was straightforward. Canada's not officially in the club yet, but the partnership's open to working with other nations, as long as it fits the program's timeline and brings real military muscle. Those signals point to a possible way in for Canada with GCAP. Experts say the country's a natural fit, thanks to its role in the Five Eyes intel group and long-standing defense ties with the UK+. Canada's recent F-35A buy aligns its fleet closer to the GCAP nations, all either flying or planning to fly the same model. The Canadian government's shown interest in developing a sixth-generation multi-role fighter by 2035. Recent defense official statements suggest talks are already cooking, though still in early stages. For Canada, this shot isn't just about tech upgrades. It's a real chance to mix up its strategic alliances and cut back on its military reliance on the US. The F-35s Canada's already locked in give it interoperability with GCAP partners, a solid point in favor of joining the program. But the debate back home goes beyond picking the right plane. There's growing pushback among Canadians about the sky-high cost and environmental hit of buying new fighters. Plenty of folks are asking if the billions earmarked for F-35s wouldn't be better spent on stuff like public health care, affordable housing, or fighting climate change. Others reckon the current fleet, with its focus on international teamwork, already does the defensive job just fine. At its core, this back and forth lays bare a bigger dilemma. What's Canada's role supposed to be in global defense, and how does it balance that with smart spending at home? The next few months are make or break for Canada's combat aviation future. The government's review of the F-35 buy, plus talks about possibly jumping into GCAP, will set the course for the country's defense strategy for decades. More than just a tech choice, this call's gonna ripple through geopolitics, shaping Canada's alignment and its ties with key allies. Going with GCAP over the F-35 could rattle things with the U.S. After all, the F-35 is a cornerstone of America's military setup and its global interoperability. Game plan. Pros and cons. F-35 versus 6th-generation fighter. The F-35, cooked up by Lockheed Martin, has become the go-to jet for a bunch of Western military heavyweights, from NATO to Israel and Australia, with supersonic speed, cutting-edge sensors, and built-in electronic warfare systems. It's widely seen as the cream of the crop in today's combat aviation. Canada's been in on the F-35 game since 1997, when it joined the development program. Back then, Washington was hunting for international cash and raked in about $40 billion in contributions. Canada's slice was $160 million, which opened the door for its companies to get in on the supply chain. Between 1997 and 2021, those firms pulled in roughly $1.3 billion in F-35 related contracts. The decision to grab the F-35 has been a roller coaster in Canadian politics. Under Stephen Harper's Conservative government, the jet got picked without an open competition. But when the Liberals took over in 2015, Justin Trudeau hit pause, opting to rethink replacing the Royal Canadian Air Force's CF-18S. Even so, the F-35 stayed in the running, and in 2022, Trudeau's crew locked in a deal for 88 units, pegged at $19 billion over the fleet's lifespan. Maintenance and operating costs, tough to pin down exactly, are expected to jack that up by tens of billions. The RCAF's plan is to get the first jets in 2026, hit operational status by 2029, and have the full fleet delivered between 2032 and 2034. The F-35 buy was chugging along until January, when the Trump administration reignited tensions by threatening Canada with fresh tariffs and even talk of symbolic annexation. That lit a fire under Ottawa. Carney, clapping back at the escalation, ordered a look at alternatives to the American jet, putting the contract's future on shaky ground. For a lot of Canadians, scrapping the deal would be a loud no thanks to Washington's strong-arming. But that move wouldn't come cheap. The country's been here before. In 1993, Jean Chrétien's government axed a deal for EH-101 helicopters and ate a $500 million cancellation fee. Bailing on the F-35 wouldn't fly under the radar in Washington. The Trump administration, especially, might hit back hard, ramping up economic retaliation and leaning on Canada diplomatically. There's bigger stakes too. The two countries are tight in NORAD, the Joint Continental Air Defense System. Right now, US F-22s and F-35s parked in Alaska sync up with Canadian Air Force jets to keep tabs on threats from Russia and China. The F-35's NORAD-friendly interoperability is a perk other planes would struggle to match. Ditching the deal would get spun in Washington as Canada jumping ship, feeding the story that it's not pulling its weight in regional defense. Running two separate fighter fleets would mean sky-high operating costs and heap more pressure on the Royal Canadian Air Force, already stretched thin with shortages of pilots, techs, instructors, and support crews. Sticking with the F-35, beyond streamlining logistics, would nudge Canada closer to NATO's 2% defense spending goal, showing it's serious about collective security. That move could also double as diplomatic leverage. Signaling readiness to seal the Lockheed Martin deal might soften Trump's tariff stance and ease trade friction, especially on lumber, aluminum, and steel exports. Bottom line, canceling the F-35 carries real risks with few short-term wins. Still, swinging to an alternative like GCAP could tighten strategic ties with the European players in the project. Canada's not the only Western ally rethinking its strategic hookups. Australia's also been eyeing GCAP with growing interest. The trigger, Trump's 25% tariffs on Aussie steel and aluminum exports. That move threw shade on the stability of their trade relationship and sparked fresh doubts about leaning too hard on old-school alliances. In response, former PM Malcolm Turnbull threw together a security policy forum in 2025 that put the U.S. alliance's reliability under the microscope and floated the idea of Canberra rethinking its strategic lockstep with Washington. Outlook: Canada's next moves in defense. Amid all this geopolitical fog, the Royal Australian Air Force kicked off a review of its future air combat needs. That deep dive includes hunting for F-35A alternatives and scoping out next-gen tech like drones and cutting-edge combat systems. Meanwhile, the AUKUS Pact stays a bedrock of Australia's defense strategy. As part of that deal, Australia's pumping $500 million into beefing up the U.S.'s submarine industrial base, tied to its nuclear sub-buy. While U.S. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth gave a public shout-out to that effort and doubled down on America's Indo-Pacific focus, Canberra's still got nagging doubts about Washington's foreign policy staying power. These latest twists have Canada and Australia both second-guessing their heavy reliance on one defense partner. Australia's growing itch for new alliances showed up big at the 2025 Avalon International Air Show in Geelong. There, Air Marshal Nicholas Hogan, head of the Royal Australian Air Force's capabilities, confirmed that British, Italian, and Japanese officials gave a detailed GCAP briefing. Hogan called it exploratory, with Australia asking for more technical nitty-gritty. The goal, he said, is prepping the Air Force for joint ops with GCAP planes down the line. Still, he stressed the program's early days, no formal offers on the table, and it's too soon for any hard political calls. So far, no buys locked in. Australia is currently running a fleet of 72 F-35A Joint Strike Fighters, 24 F/A, 18 F Super Hornets, and 12 E/A 18G Growlers. The 2024 National Defense Investment Plan calls for keeping the Super Hornet and Growler fleets humming through at least 2040, while the Air Force wrestles with its aging current-gen fighters. At Avalon, Malcolm Davis from the Australian Strategic Policy Institute said manned aircraft will stay front and center for Aussie military muscle, even as autonomous systems creep in. Air Marshal John Haley, who handles the military's strategic planning, added that any new moves, buying jets or joining foreign consortia, will hinge on a joint government RAEAF breakdown. So, what's the GCAP anyway? The Global Combat Air Program kicked off in 2022 with the UK, Japan, and Italy teaming up to pool tech and industrial know-how for a sixth-generation fighter. It's a big swing. The first prototype flights slated for 2027, with full service by 2035. This isn't just a manned jet, it's a whole air combat system, mixing piloted planes with advanced drones, integrated sensors, and a data network powered by cloud computing and AI. The sixth-gen manned fighter's packing next-level tech, think top-tier radar, and maybe even high-powered microwave systems. Its design's built for long-range combat. Last July, at the Farnborough International Air Show, the GCAP trio unveiled a new conceptual model with a wider wingspan for better aerodynamics and flight efficiency. To run the project, they set up the GCAP International Government Organization, tasked with sorting out operational needs, tracking tech progress, and syncing up the industrial side. GCO's based in the UK, chaired by Japan, with industrial leadership split between Leonardo, Italy, Mitsubishi Heavy Industries, Japan, and BAE Systems, UK. The GCAP crew says this fighter will be one of the most advanced, versatile, and interoperable out there. Standouts include a software-driven interactive cockpit, fully baked-in sensors, smart weapons, and next-gen radar, promising top-notch tactical edge and situational awareness. It's set to replace the Eurofighter Typhoon, flown by Italy's Air Force and the RAF, and Japan's Mitsubishi F-2. The consortium's aiming for 350 units by 2035. For the UK, 30 Tranche 1 Typhoons are due to retire by 2027, with no word yet on extra orders. Current estimates peg their need at up to 107 jets to swap out the old fleet. Italy's got about 93 Eurofighters in service and locked in 24 Tranche 3 units in 2024 to phase out older ones. Japan's roughly 90 Mitsubishi F-2s will shift to GCAP, with a full switch by 2035. Add up the jets needing replacement across the UK, Italy, and Japan, and you're looking at a baseline of about 294th-gen aircraft. How they'll split the remaining 60 of the planned 350 is still up in the air. Each country might bump their share to around 110 to 120 GCAP jets. The GCAP team's got a clear strategic play, locked down a lead spot in the global 6th-gen fighter market. They're aiming to be the first mover, cracking open export opportunities before rival projects catch up. That's looking more doable with Trump's new curbs on U.S. exports. Canada's not the only one sniffing around. Sweden and Saudi Arabia have poked at joining too. Sweden's talks with the Tempest program fizzled over delays in fleet replacement plans, so they doubled down on the Gripen. Saudi Arabia's keen, driven by a push to build its own defense industry, but Japan's balking over export limits and tech security. The UK and Italy are more open, though no formal deals are sealed yet. GCAP was built with exports in mind. To make that work, Japan had to loosen its tight arms transfer rules, syncing up with the UK and Italy's freer policies. On the industrial front, BAE Systems, Leonardo, and Japan Aircraft Industrial Enhancement Kimsu teamed up in a joint venture to steer development, production, and maintenance through the jet's lifecycle. The UK's reiterated Canada's still a legit contender for joining down the road, though nothing's official yet. New members will need strategic fit, financial muscle, and technical chops without gumming up the timeline. For now, the UK, Japan, and Italy are the GCAP's core, with the first demo set for 2027 and service entry in 2035. Where Canada and Australia land in this picture will shake out in the coming months. Thanks for tuning in. Where Canada and Australia end up in this new global defense setup is still TBD. The calls they make next could redraw strategic alliances and shape the tech balance for the next 20 years. What about you? Think Canada should ditch the F-35 and tighten up with the UK and Japan? Or would that gamble mess with its spot in America's security framework? Drop your take in the comments. Your perspective helps dig deeper into this debate. And hey, if this kind of geopolitical breakdown helps you get a grip on the behind-the-scenes power plays, think about subscribing and hitting that like button. It keeps this independent work rolling. Catch you in the next one.